Timothy Scott Boyle was born in 1990. He lived in Gadsden, Alabama. At some point, he entered a relationship with a woman who had 2 young daughters. One of them was named Savannah White. Boyle wasn't their biological father, but he took on the role, and for a while, it seemed like he was helping raise them, until something went terribly wrong. In October 2005, in Rainbow City, Alabama, 2-year-old Savannah White lost her life from severe injuries. She had been in Boyle's care. Her older sister later told investigators what she saw. She said Boyle had slapped Savannah, then thrown her against a bathtub. Medical experts confirmed it. The trauma to her head had been devastating. On December 20th, 2006, Boyle was charged with the most serious offense possible in connection with Savannah's case. She was only 2. He was also charged with illegal possession of substances. The trial didn't happen right away. It took place in November 2009. In court, the prosecution laid it all out: injuries, patterns, witness accounts. Doctors, family members, even Savannah's sister took the stand. The story they told was painful, and the jury believed every word. They found Boyle guilty on all charges. On March 12, 2010, Circuit Judge David Kimberly sentenced Boyle to capita, punishment by injection, following the jury's recommendation. Boyle also received 10 years in prison for the substance charge. He later asked the court to review his case, questioning the fairness of his convictions and sentence. The court denied this request and kept the original decisions. As of 2025, Timothy Scott Boyle remains on row at Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. The next story started with threats, then stalking, then something far worse. Bobby Baker Jr. was born in the mid-1960s. He grew up in Houston County, Alabama. As an adult, Bobby married Tracy Neja Wynn. They got married on October 18, 1991. But from the start, their marriage was rocky. The relationship quickly became toxic. Things turned aggressive. Tracy faced repeated harm in that relationship. Reports say Bobby didn't just argue with her. He physically hurt her. He harassed her. There was even an incident where he kept her confined for about a week. She wasn't free to leave. Then came April 5th, 1994. That day changed everything. Tracy was spending time at a friend's house on Short Atlanta Street in Dothan. One of the people there was a man she knew. At some point, Bobby found out where she was, and he showed up. He waited until the group was about to leave. Then he confronted them. Tension exploded. Bobby went after the male friend, physically hurting him and threatening to take his life. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that same day, Bobby forced his way into Tracy's home. He took her from there and pushed her into his car. She didn't leave willingly. He then drove her out to a remote spot. Bobby used a firearm to harm Tracy multiple times. She didn't survive. Authorities charged Bobby with several serious offenses: the first-degree homicide under Alabama law, physical harm in the first degree, and using a firearm. He claimed he wasn't guilty. He also initially said he had mental health issues, but he later dropped that part of his plea. In 1995, a jury found him guilty on all counts. 10 out of 12 jurors believed he deserved the maximum penalty. The court agreed, but that wasn't the end of the legal battle. In 2004, the Alabama Supreme Court threw out the conviction. They said the trial included unfair details about Bobby's past behavior toward Tracy. Because of that, a new trial had to be held. That second trial happened in 2007, and once again, Bobby was found guilty. He received the same sentence as before. He kept appealing, but Alabama's Criminal Appeals Court stood by the conviction and the sentence. Bobby then turned to the U.S. Supreme Court, hoping they'd take a second look. But in 2012, they refused to review the case. As of 2025, Bobby Baker Jr. remains on row at Holman Prison in Alabama. The next victim was 73. The teens responsible would change more than one life forever. Christopher D. Barber was born in 1969. On March 21, 1992, in Montgomery, Alabama, 16-year-old William Roberts came home to a nightmare. He found his mother, 73-year-old Thelma Bishop Roberts, lying in her bedroom. Something was terribly wrong. She wasn't moving. There were wounds all over her body. A plastic bag was over her head. A sharp kitchen object was lodged in her chest, and the air smelled like smoke. In shock, William pulled off the bag and removed the object. Then he called for help. At the medical exam, doctors found 9 deep cuts to her chest, some reaching vital organs. Her eyes were swollen. Her skin showed signs of being burned. And something else was missing: her jewelry. Later, one of the suspects, D Barber, spoke with investigators. He said he and 2 friends, Christopher Hester and Mike Mitchell, had planned to visit someone that day. But when that person wasn't home, they went next door, to Thelma's house. They said they sat inside, drank beer, talked for a while. But what started as a visit turned into something darker. According to Barber, Hester and Thelma moved toward the back of the house. Not long after, Barber and Mitchell heard shouting. They ran in and saw Hester holding Thelma down. That's when everything spiraled. Barber said they joined in. They hurt her. And afterward, they panicked. Barber admitted he was afraid she could identify them. So he went to the kitchen, grabbed a sharp object, and used it to make sure she couldn't speak. He also noticed her jewelry was gone. To cover their tracks, he tried to start a fire. Prosecutors later argued that this wasn't just a moment of panic. It was an act committed during the course of a burglary and arson, and that made it a capital offense. The trial began in 1993. Prosecutors showed the confession and physical evidence tying Barber to the scene. His defense team pushed back. They claimed the confession came under pressure and shouldn't be trusted. Still, the jury found him guilty of capital homicide. The judge imposed the harshest sentence on him. Barber fought back. He filed appeal after appeal. He challenged his trial and that confession. Then, in 2021, a DNA test shook the case. The sample on the victim didn't match Barber. It matched a neighbor instead. That discovery cast serious doubt on everything we thought we knew. As of 2025, Barber remains behind bars. But now, the questions aren't just about what happened in 1992. They're about whether the wrong man has been paying the price ever since. The next incident wasn't random. It was ruthless. And it started with a favor. Tony Barksdale entered the world in 1976. He spent his childhood in Virginia. At 19, he moved to Alexander City, Alabama. There, he barely knew anyone. His family wasn't around. Who he had met there would change everything. In late November 1995, he crossed paths with 2 locals, Jonathan David Garrison and Kevin Hilburn. The 3 stuck together. On the night of November 30th, they set off for Alexander City. What had they planned? By the morning of December 1st, they had taken a car in Guntersville without permission. They drove south, but disaster struck near Sylacauga. A crash. Did they stop? They pressed on and arrived in Alexander City by late afternoon. They tried to wave down passing cars. No one pulled over. Barksdale, carrying a gun, made his intention clear. He would force someone into giving them a ride. Then they saw her, 19-year-old Julie Catherine Rhodes, on her way home from work. He flagged her down. She agreed to help. During the drive, he steered into a remote spot. What happened next? He opened fire twice, once aimed at her face and once at her back, ending her life. He pushed her out of the car. He told Garrison and Hilburn to hop in. Together, they got rid of anything that tied them to the scene. Then, they headed back to Guntersville. Barksdale still carried that gun. It hadn't been a snap decision. He had made up his mind. He had just wanted to get home. He hadn't cared about the cost. Law enforcement caught up with him soon after. He was booked on 2 counts of capital offense, one for the act during a theft in progress, and another for using a weapon while someone was in his vehicle. The jury found him guilty on both counts. 11 jurors pushed for capital punishment. The judge agreed. Barksdale was sent to face the electric chair. He didn't stop fighting. He filed a federal petition, arguing his lawyers had dropped the ball. The district court turned him down. He appealed again. In 2020, the Court of Appeals slammed the door. He has run out of legal options. As of 2025, Tony Barksdale remains on row in Alabama. What comes next for him? Only time will tell. Next, a quiet home, an elderly widow, and the half-brothers who turned it into a horror scene. Rex Allan Beckworth was born on January 22, 1966, in Alabama. He grew up in a tough setting. His bond with family was strained. His younger half-brother, James Earl Walker, later joined him in a shocking incident. What pushed them together? In the early hours of January 10, 2000, they forced their way into the home of an 87-year-old widow, Bessie Lee Thwaite. She had lived there alone for 67 years. What went through her mind when the door burst open? The intruders searched every room. They took her valuables. Then things turned tragic. Mrs. Thwaite suffered an aggressive blow and a fatal head wound. What weapon could cause such harm? A .22 caliber rifle. It showed up days later in a nearby waterway. Angela Lynn Foster was locked up in Houston County Jail at that time. She later spoke to investigators. She said she saw Rex and James together just before that night. She named Rex as the one in charge. He picked the target and made the plan. She also spotted a gun in Rex's car trunk. He claimed he'd been given that gun by someone else. Who really handed it over? The motive behind the incident was theft. Beckworth and Walker targeted Mrs. Thwaite's home intending to steal valuables, knowing she lived alone and was known to keep money inside her home and vehicle. Investigators moved fast. James was picked up in Gadsden, Alabama. He admitted to his part in the break-in and the fatal outcome. Rex was traced to Phoenix, Arizona. Deputies from Houston County flew out and brought him back. He faced the first-degree homicide charge under Alabama law. In 2002, a jury found Rex guilty. They agreed the tragedy happened during a break-in, which raised the charge's severity. Witnesses described Rex's steps before and after the act. Physical evidence tied him to the rifle and the scene. Could there be any doubt left? Rex's defense argued his rights were trampled. They said his lawyer had dropped the ball. The courts rejected those claims. His verdict held firm. After that, Rex received the state's ultimate penalty. He appealed. In 2005, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals refused to overturn his case. In 2006, the Alabama Supreme Court passed on a review. In 2007, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to get involved. No more chances there, right? In 2007, Rex filed a petition seeking another look at his case. He again claimed poor legal help and rights violations. The trial court tossed it out. In 2009, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals said no again. Today, in 2025, Rex remains at Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama, awaiting the final penalty. His half-brother, James Earl Walker, is there too, facing the same outcome. But what drove the next individual to the edge of human cruelty? Born in 1985 in Alabama, he grew up in the quiet rural stretches of Bibb County. Not much is known about his family life. As an adult, Belchure's path began to shift. His record shows multiple run-ins involving illegal substances, leading to more than a few encounters with law enforcement. Then came November 9, 2015. Hikers in Talladega National Forest made a grim discovery: the body of 29-year-old Samantha Payne. Her remains were already deteriorating. But it wasn't just the condition, it was the way she was found, tied to a tree. Her wrists bound with a belt and cable. And most disturbingly, she had been decapitated. It shook the local community to its core. How did she end up there? Investigators believe she was taken from Bibb County against her will and held captive. The motive still isn't fully clear, but the level of brutality suggested something deeply personal. Possibly someone she knew. Michael Belchure's name entered the case weeks later. Authorities arrested him, claiming he had played a central role. In court, his co-defendants didn't hold back. They described him as the one in charge, the one who took things further than anyone else. What did the jury decide? They found him guilty of taking her life. The court ordered he face capital punishment. On April 3, 2019, Judge Brad Allman pronounced that sentence. Instead of a simple term, he was to face a state-administered procedure. Did his team accept this? Not at all. They filed an appeal. They argued he has a mild neurocognitive disorder. They said it affected his understanding of what happened. But in the end, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals stood firm. They ruled that the severity of his actions outweighed any doubts. Rick Allan Balile was born in 1969. In May 1999, Rick and his wife Annette were desperate for cash. They chose the T&J Quick Mart in Boaz, Alabama as their target. Annette had worked there before. One slow night, clerk Joyce Moore was alone behind the counter. What happened next turned even worse than they'd planned. Rick walked in with Annette. He grabbed a 6-pound can of peas and a metal pipe. He struck Joyce again and again. Those blows caused injuries she couldn't survive. After that fatal encounter, the couple fled to Missouri. Why did they think they could outrun justice? They were arrested there before they could slip away. Their motive was simple. They needed money. They needed it fast. A planned break-in spiraled into a fatal encounter. At trial, Rick faced 2 capital-level charges, one for homicide during theft and one for homicide during a burglary. Annette took the stand against him. Her testimony painted a clear picture of what went down. The jury found Rick guilty on both counts. The judge handed him capital punishment. Appeals through Alabama's courts couldn't overturn that outcome. But what kind of plan begins with a man waiting in the shadows of a silent mall parking lot? Brandon Joseph Benjamin was born on March 19, 1980, in Dothan, Alabama. He grew up in the Wiregrass region of southeastern Alabama. That area is mostly rural and faces economic struggles. We don't know much about his early family life, but his modest upbringing may have shaped his later choices. On the night of November 18, 2000, Benjamin showed up in the parking lot of Wiregrass Commons Mall. He had watched the mall's routines ahead of time. He picked a quiet corner and waited. Jimmy Lewis, a 55-year-old man, parked there to pick up his wife from work. Benjamin saw his chance. He stepped up behind Lewis and demanded his wallet. Lewis resisted. Benjamin hit him several times. Then he pulled out a gun. He fired 2 shots, one to the chest and one to the leg. Lewis lost his life soon after. Benjamin ran off, but he was caught not long after. Why did Benjamin plan it this way? His goal was clear: money. His ahead-of-time watching shows, he arranged every detail of the act. At trial, he was charged under a statute for theft that turned fatal. The prosecution detailed his preparation and the aggressiveness of the act. The defense asked for a lighter outcome, pointing to Benjamin's age and clean record before this. Still, the jury voted 10-2 for the harshest sentence. On September 2, 2004, the judge imposed that sentence. Benjamin tried to challenge the case after his trial. He filed a petition claiming his lawyers did not prepare well, especially during jury selection. The court reviewed his claims. It found that his lawyers' choices were reasonable, and that none of their actions unfairly harmed Benjamin. In 2013, the appeals court looked everything over. It agreed the original trial and sentence were fair. No major mistakes emerged. Today, Benjamin remains at Holman Correctional Facility. That facility houses those awaiting the harshest penalties. As of March 2025, there are 156 people there. None have a date set for their sentence to be carried out. Kenneth Eugene Bilips was born in 1971 in Alabama. What was his childhood like? We don't know much. Few records exist about his family or early years. Yet what little we see hints at a troubled start. His illegal acts grew more serious over time. His first of many fatal acts came during a theft. He was found guilty of taking Stephen Lockett's life while carrying out a forceful break-in. Under Alabama law, that made it an offense eligible for the harshest penalty. But that was only the beginning. Investigators linked him to 13 more fatalities. The names read like a grim list: Wilbur Gomez, Enrique Marquez, Rafael Salcedo, and Manuel Nunez Perez among them. Each took place during either a forced break-in, theft, or the unlawful detention of another person. That pattern pushed each count into the most serious category under state rules. Why did he do it? Money and a complete disregard for other people's safety seemed to be the answer. Some of his victims were very young. That fact alone shows how far he was willing to go. His trial added another twist. The jury voted 7-5 to lock him away for life without any chance of release. Then the judge stepped in and imposed the maximum penalty instead. How could that happen? Alabama law lets judges override jury decisions in certain cases. On appeal, the state's highest court stepped in. It found serious mistakes in the trial. Jurors had been shown graphic photos and heard details from a separate case that had nothing to do with Lockett's case. The court ruled those errors were too big to ignore, so they wiped the verdict and sent the case back for a fresh start. Nearly 3 years later, we're still waiting. As of May 2025, there's no new outcome on record. Bilips remains under the threat of that same ultimate penalty. Now meet a mother, accused of inflicting fatal harm on her own toddler. Patricia Blackman was born in 1969 in Alabama. There is little information about her early life or family in public records. Later, she became a mother to several children. One of them was Dominiqua Bryant, whom she adopted. On May 29, 1999, Patricia called emergency services. She said Dominiqua was not responding. Paramedics arrived at Patricia's mobile home in Dothan, Alabama, around 9:30 p.m. They found Dominiqua, who was 28 months old, not breathing. Patricia said Dominiqua had fallen off a bed and hit a bedpost. But medical experts found a fractured skull and many bruises. They said these injuries came from repeated harmful impacts. An autopsy showed many new and old injuries, including a broken right leg. Dr. Alfredo Paredes, a former medical examiner, said Dominiqua had been stomped in the chest hard enough to leave a shoe print. Dr. Jamie Downs, the chief medical examiner and head of the State Department of Forensic Sciences, said he was sure Dominiqua was beaten and stomped until she stopped breathing. In 2000, the case went to trial. Patricia was charged with taking a life under special circumstances that allow Alabama's toughest punishment. The question was whether she did it on purpose. The jury decided she did. They found she had willfully taken Dominiqua's life. This verdict made Patricia eligible for the harshest penalty in the state. Her lawyers argued something different. They asked the court to consider if Dominiqua might have been awake during the harm. If that were true, it could remove an important part needed for the toughest punishment. The jury was not convinced. They voted 10-2 to give the harshest sentence. On July 19, 2002, a judge confirmed their decision. The reason why Patricia did this is not clear. Court records and other information do not show a clear motive. There is no evidence of money problems, mental health issues, or other common causes in cases like this. The lack of a clear reason makes the case even more difficult to understand. Patricia appealed her sentence. Her lawyers said the jury did not prove the special factor needed for the maximum punishment. However, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals kept both her conviction and sentence. Today, Patricia is still at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, waiting to serve her sentence. Her story continues to raise questions about whether Alabama should use capital punishment at all. The next woman said it was an accident. The evidence left investigators shaken. Jerry Dwayne Bohannan was born in 1970 in Mobile, Alabama. He grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood. He got into trouble early and often. Why did he clash with the law so much? Details about his family are hard to find. But his record shows a clear pattern of escalating offenses. His police file lists several arrests. Most were for aggressive behavior. That points to anger issues. It also shows he ignored basic rules. Then came June 25, 2011, outside the Paradise Lounge in Mobile. 2 men lost their lives that night, Jerry Du Bois and Anthony Harvey. Witnesses say Bohannan walked up and opened fire on them. No warning, no provocation. What drove him to strike so suddenly? Investigators linked the shooting to illegal substance deals. Bohannan was part of the local trade. He had clashed with the victims over territory. This act looked like payback, a way to remove rivals and claim control. Bohannan was arrested not long after. He faced the state's most serious charges. At trial, the prosecution offered eyewitness testimony and ballistics reports. Bohannan said he acted in self-defense. The jury rejected that claim. On October 23, 2015, the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals upheld his conviction. The judges ruled the evidence was strong enough to support the verdict. They left his original sentence in place, the harshest penalty available under state law. He filed appeals over and over. In November 2021, he submitted a Rule 32 petition. He argued that his rights were violated during trial and sentencing. Both the lower court and the appeals court dismissed his claims in 2023. They found no errors that could change his fate. As of May 2025, Jerry Dwayne Bohannan remains on row in Alabama. Anthony Boyd was born in Alabama, though specific details about his early life and family remain scarce. He was one of 4 men involved in the case surrounding Gregory Hughley, a man known as New York in the local community. The incident occurred on July 31, 1993, in Anniston, Alabama, and was driven by a $200 debt owed by Hughley to Boyd and his associates. On the evening of July 31, 1993, Boyd, along with co-defendants Sean Ingram, Marcel Ackles, and Quinte Cox, set out to confront Gregory Hughley over an unpaid controlled substance debt. They located Hughley on 15th Street in Anniston and took him at gunpoint, forcing him into a rented blue van. The group then traveled to a remote baseball field in Munford, Alabama, where they bound Hughley to a bench using duct tape. Sean Ingram doused Hughley with gasoline and set him on fire, while Boyd and the others watched. Hughley passed away from the burns after approximately 10 to 15 minutes. The group then returned to Anniston, with one participant remarking, "We are all in this together. If one goes down, all go down." The group's decision to take Hughley's life was an aggressive response to the debt, reflecting a disregard for human life in pursuit of monetary gain. Anthony Boyd was arrested and charged with taking his life. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence that Boyd played an active role in the incident. On May 19, 1995, he was sentenced to capital punishment. Boyd appealed his conviction and sentence, but the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals upheld both. In subsequent years, Boyd filed various legal motions, including a request for alternative execution methods such as hanging or firing squad. However, the courts rejected these requests, affirming that lethal injection and electrocution were the only approved methods in Alabama. Nicholas Bernard Ackan was born in 1971 in Huntsville, Alabama. His parents were Velma Evans and Theodis Ackan. Little is known about his early years, but then came the night that changed everything. On the night of September 25, 1996, 3 men walked into Ashley Rutherford's apartment in Huntsville, Alabama. Their names were Nicholas Bernard Ackan, Joseph Wilson, and Corey Johnson. Each carried at least one firearm, a .357 Magnum revolver, a Ruger 9mm pistol, and 2 Lorson 9mm pistols. They crowded 7 people into a 13 by 18-foot room. For about 2 hours, they questioned everyone. They wanted to know about a police report filed a week earlier for a stolen cell phone and a small amount of marijuana. They also physically harmed some occupants and forced others to stand in degrading positions. As the evening went on, their behavior grew more aggressive. They beat a few people with a whiskey bottle. At one point, Ackan took Michelle Hayden outside. He said he needed to watch for Mr. Rutherford's return. While they were alone, he made unwanted advances toward her. When Ashley Rutherford returned, Ackan pointed a gun at Hayden and forced her back inside. Just before midnight, Ackan and Wilson opened fire. They shot 19 rounds of 9mm ammunition into the room. 6 of the 7 people there were hit in the head or nearby areas. 4, Charles Lamar Hemphill, Michael A. Bodette, Johnny Couch, and Brian Carter, passed from their injuries. Ashley Rutherford and Michelle Hayden were seriously wounded, but survived. One person managed to slip away unharmed. Police arrived soon after. They found Wilson and Johnson at about 12:25 a.m. A .357 Magnum revolver sat under Johnson's car seat. Ackan was arrested at his home just before 2 a.m. Officers recovered the remaining guns and Mr. Bodette's driver's license there. Why did it happen? That's still a mystery. No clear motive ever surfaced. But the way it was planned? It wasn't random. There had to be a reason. Maybe revenge. Maybe something else hidden in Ackan's past. His family stood by him. His mother paid his lawyer $150 per hour and ended up covering $1,900. His father chipped in too. He made 3 separate payments totaling $2,900. On January 10, 1997, a grand jury in Madison County brought charges. Ackan was charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide and 2 counts of attempted loss of life. His trial began in 1998. He faced 6 charges in total. The jury found him guilty on every single one. When it came to sentencing, the jury voted 10-2 for capital punishment. 2 jurors hesitated, but the judge went with the majority. He also got 2 20-year terms, one for each person who survived. On top of that, the court added fines and made him pay victim compensation. He appealed the decision over and over again. It went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. None of it worked. His conviction and sentence were upheld. The final ruling came on January 12, 2001. In June 2002, he tried again. He filed a petition for post-conviction relief, known as Rule 32, in Alabama. Over the next 11 years, he filed 3 more versions of that petition and made several discovery requests. Some claims were rejected right away, but others led to a hearing in December 2013. Still, in 2017, the Court of Criminal Appeals shut it down. As of 2025, Nicholas Ackan remains in Holman Correctional Facility in Atmore, Alabama. He continues trying to challenge his sentence. So far, every attempt has failed.